Okay. Dead on 3 o'clock. We'll start. Good afternoon. Some of you have come back from my first talk, which thank you for coming back. So for those of you that I haven't met, haven't spoken to yet, my name's Geoff. I'm over from the UK to give a couple of talks about metrics, about progress, about success, things like that. So just spent an hour talking about how we might know if we're becoming more of an agile team. And now what I'm going to do is try and explore the topic of how we might know if we're becoming and ultimately have become an agile organization, an agile enterprise. Now, first of all, for those of you that were here for my talk just an hour ago, there's obviously going to be a couple of little bits of overlap here. There's going to be some common ground between an agile team and an agile organization, but it's a different talk. The idea behind this talk really here is to try and work out what a definition of done might be for an agile transformation, for an organization wishing to become an agile organization. How we might measure progress along the way, and if there are any traps that we might want to avoid along the way. See if we can see some of those. Something around. How many of you guys have got children? Ooh, quite a lot of you. How many of you have taken your children on a long car journey? A lot of you. Okay. So I wonder whether this might seem familiar to you.
No.
Are we there yet?
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 You little...
I think we're there.
So when I first started with Agile, I was at a large company, British Telecom, and this was something that our CIO said, if we don't become an Agile organization, if we don't start being Agile, we will cease to exist as an organization. So we have to do this. But didn't tell us what Agile was. Didn't tell us how we were going to do it. Just said, we need to do this. And Bart and Lisa, constantly asking, are we there yet? Are we there yet? That's a natural reaction for kids. They're short attention spans. They want to know whether they don't care about the journey. They just want to be there. They just want to be in this better place, wherever it is they're going. And the better the place is that they're going, the more they want to know if they're there or not. Equally, management in an organization, they're paying for this transformation. They're paying for this change, and that's not cheap. And there's a lot of chaos and a lot of uncertainty along the way, so they want to know, where are we? Are we there yet? Natural questions to ask. So I've got some experience of large organizations trying to become agile organizations, and I get phone calls from people saying, we're going to start with this agile stuff. I hear you've done it before, so we would like some help. Can you tell us how long it's going to take? Roughly. I said, well, no, I can't. I don't know how long it's going to take. I said, well, you must have. You've done it before. I said, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's repeatable. Okay, this transformation is going to be very different. Again, for those of you that were here for my first talk, you all have met Elmo. Elmo, my little friend, that I've borrowed from my son for this trip without him knowing. Elmo is my special guest who's going to help me talk to you guys. People seem to find it easier talking to cuddly animals than they do talking to me. So, who likes Elmo? People who've been here before aren't going to put their hands up anymore. Oh, it's not very easy to throw. Could you pass it back? Thank you. 2 guys behind you had his hand up. Brilliant. What's your name, sir? Linus. Thank you, Linus. Do you like Elmo? It's good. Elmo would like to know something about you. All right, so let's assume for a minute your company wants to become agile. All right. How would you personally define success? Throughput. Okay? Throughput. What about throughput? Functionality. So what? Functionality should increase? We should have more functionality? More functionality with higher quality, okay? Or the same quality as long as it's high. Okay, so but functionality is important to you. All right, so if we're producing more functionality, then we are an agile organization. Okay. Yeah, so we are a company that has a responsibility or a purpose to deliver functionality. If we deliver more of it, then that's a good thing. If Agile will help us do that, that's a good thing. Okay, brilliant. Could you pass Elmo to somebody else? They won't put their hands up. They're a Norwegian crowd. Okay, hi, what's your name? Tadiev? Okay, brilliant. Your company now wants to go Agile. How would you define success? Okay, so when we have achieved the ability to often reschedule our purpose. That's an interesting definition. Okay, so we can change the direction of our organization quite easily when we need to. We can react to change. Okay, good one. Thank you, Tadiev. Who are you going to throw it to now? Throw it somewhere closer this way so it's easier to get back to me. So I will need to return it. Brilliant. One more. You've been selected by Elmo. Hi, sir. What's your name? Nick. Hi, Nick. Your company is now going Agile. How would you define success? Where the customer is. Okay, so tell me more about the customer. Customer satisfaction. Okay, so kind of similar to Linus there. If your purpose is to have happy customers, then we want more happy customers, or the same number but happier. Yeah, and if Agile will help us, that's a good thing. Thanks, Nick. Can you see if you can reach? Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, round of applause for people who just participated. Okay, brilliant. So some interesting answers there. When I looked for a definition of success on the internet, this is what I came across. I like your definitions better. All right. Now, most organisations, when they start with this agile thing, are looking for some kind of scorecard that they can mark themselves against. Right. It's built into us. We like scorecards, we like grades, we like numbers, we like percentages, we like tick marks, we like green boxes, we like these kinds of things. And the only real document that we had, or scorecard that we had at BT when we started this, was the Agile Manifesto. Right. And so we would say we need to be an agile organisation. That's what our CIO said. So we looked at the Agile Manifesto and we looked at what that said. And we thought, well, we want to perhaps improve on some of these areas. And they were pretty good ideas to start with. Yeah, so we wanted to collaborate with our customers. We wanted to be able to respond to change, kind of similar to what Tadiev was talking about there. We want to get better individuals interacting better, and we want some working product at the end of it. Now, at BT, we cringed at the word software because we're not just a software place. Right? We do hardware, we do switches, we do cables, we do all sorts of things. We don't just do software. But anyway, working product, whatever that may be. And as for those of you that heard my first talk, we talked about this as perhaps being some early metrics for teams as well. And this could aggregate itself up. We could see progress across the teams. We could look at this at an organisational level. We could say, well, how, as an organisation, do we collaborate more with our customers? And perhaps we could do that. Large organisations, that's quite difficult because different departments will be better at some things than others. So that would be quite difficult. But equally, we might, as we did at the team level, think about the principles of the Agile Manifesto, a little bit more concrete than the values, but still fairly abstract. Still quite useful for us though, so we could track some progress there. Now, either as an aggregation of all of our teams or our departments, or just changing the definitions of the points along these scales for our organisation, changing the meta definitions. We could do that and see our growth. The other thing that we had fairly early on was this Nokia Test, which, again, I talked about earlier on. And this was available to us quite quickly. But, again, while we can track progress over time, and we can see the different dimensions, did it really help us? Did it really help us? I don't know. The Nokia Test was useful in some regards, as we talked about before. It has some important things, iterations, customer, things like that. And we can track over time, which is very useful to us to know whether we're on track. but it doesn't necessarily focus us on the right things. And as I talked about in the product owner role, you can get some very different and conflicting weightings and scorings. So I really like Linus's comment of, well, agility is not really the goal here. Okay, the point of this transformation is not for us to be the most agile organization in the world, or even perfectly agile, even if there is such a thing. That's not our goal. Our goal is to be a better company. And agility might be a metric for that, or a proxy metric for that. So the more agile we are, the better the organization we're going to be. Therefore, if we measure our agility, it's a good indicator that we're becoming a better company. That seems like a rational line of thought. So why are we doing this? That would be a good question for most organizations to ask. All organizations to ask. Why are we doing this agile thing? Why are we contemplating doing this? Why, when the CIO comes in and says we have to be agile, otherwise we won't be a business anymore, why is that true? What is there out there that's forcing us down this road? And of course, every organization is going to be different when they're asked that question. It could be we need to get our products to our customers quicker. That was probably the number one reason at BT, shrinking our cycle time from 2 years down to 3 months. That was one of the goals. But you might be thinking in other terms. You might be thinking in terms of quality. Linus mentioned quality. We want not just output, but we want quality to be high or higher. That might be a goal. That might be a reason we become more agile. It's in the top 5, I would suggest. Equally, we might want to become more predictable. Get into a habit as an organization of being able to keep our promises, being able to reliably deliver at a predictable schedule. Consumers, customers like predictability. We like the trains running on time. Right? We like security in the knowledge that on a certain date we're going to get something. So predictability might be a goal. We might be producing so much waste, we need to reduce that. However we define waste within our organization. Or we might be going down this agile route to become more innovative, to be able to deliver more innovative products. It's another reason why organizations will adopt an agile approach, an agile strategy. So I thoroughly recommend anybody who is thinking of becoming an agile organization or becoming part of an agile organization, to ask this question, why? And here's an example of one of the companies that I was working with when I asked this question. They thought I was joking, all right, just as perhaps you might have thought I was joking when I was going to throw Elmo out into the crowd. I asked them to draw what they thought their company would look like after they have become an agile organization. So to assume success, assume we have done this thing, we're now in 2013 or whatever it is, and it's happened. It's done. It was painful, it was difficult, but we made it. And here we are. We are now an agile organization. What does that look like? And so they did it. Okay, they got some pens, they got some paper, and as a team they worked it out. They worked out that they would have some happy smiling faces. They might be working outside. They would have some happy customers. They'd have a great product. They would be happy at work. They'd have satisfaction at work. The ownership of the product, of the work, would be collaborative, and teams would have enriched job and freedom. That was their definition of success. Nothing there about the Agile Manifesto, nothing there about the principles, nothing there about stand-ups, retrospectives. It's to do with customers, to do with product, to do with employees, and to do with happiness. Reasons why they wanted to go agile. Now, once we've got those base reasons, we can then start working out how we're going to measure them. And these are harder to measure, potentially. So we get some agile drivers. Now, any organization that's measuring something will recommend getting what was called a balanced scorecard. You don't just focus on one thing; you focus on a number of different things. And I would echo that, even in assessing our agile progress. So here we go. We've got time to market. I mentioned BT was average was 2 years a while ago. Wanted to shrink that down, because our competitors were able to turn out products a lot quicker than we were. So time to market was a driver. So we wanted to capture some data on that. Now this, I have to say, let you know now, this is not real data. This is just made up data. This is not attached to any company. I don't want to get sued. So time to market data. How has our time to market been getting progressively better or progressively worse? Where are we now? We need a benchmark so that we can know whether we're making any progress. You might be able to go back in time because you might have been capturing that. You might be able to go back 3 years. You might decide that, well, market share. We want to increase our market share, or at least stop it eroding. So this is showing that over the last few years, and projected figures for next year are showing an erosion of our market share. That's something that we don't want to happen. We want to focus on stopping that and reversing it. And another measure, or two measures in this case, is around satisfaction of our customers and engagement of our employees. So these could be some agile drivers that we would track. The important thing is to get some metrics. And organizations are not brilliant at capturing and keeping this kind of data. Just to see what happens, really. How many of you know what your company's time to market is? How long does it take a product to get to your users within your organization? How many of you know that? 2? How many of you know what your market share is? 1, 2, 3, 3.5. What about your customer satisfaction? Do you know what your customer satisfaction score is? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, not that many. Most people in an organization are unaware of this data. Yet it's very important. It's what we're there for as an organization. We tend to pay attention to the data that's real and the data that we're aware of. Come on in, don't worry. So we need to first of all have this information, and second of all make it available to our people so that we can use it, we're aware of it, we're part of it. So we have some agile drivers. Then once we've got those drivers, we can start comparing. Now, we were arguably in a fortunate position at BT because we had a department. I say a department, it was an external department that was created. I say external in the fact that it wasn't responsible, it wasn't reporting to management within the organization, so they weren't pressured into giving the information that they wanted to hear. So this was an external department that had been tracking certain metrics for decades. All right? And the metrics that are particularly important to what I'm talking about here are time. So how long does it take us to create a product, create a project, or deliver a project in elapsed months? How much does it cost us in terms of pounds per function point? What the quality was in terms of raw errors plus errors per 1,000 function points found in system test, acceptance test, and month 1. So that was the definition of quality there. Some kind of lagging indicators. Size measured in function points, and productivity, function points per unit of effort. Now, regardless of whether this data is the best it could be, so even back in 2005 when they first started measuring this for agile projects, even then there was still talk about whether function points was actually a relevant metric. That's not really the point. The point here is that we have some consistency. We have something that we can measure over time. Obviously, the better the metric, the better the results. But we're looking for some consistency here, and this metric we could go back in time against. And so between 2005 2008, what this external department found was that the number of agile projects was increasing. Now, whether that's a true reflection of whether you would call it an agile project and whether I would call it an agile project is another matter. But the number of agile projects was increasing. And within those agile projects, they were twice as productive, so we were getting twice as many function points per unit of effort on agile projects than we were on our traditional projects, so that was a good thing. We were getting our deliveries quicker, so in half the time, half the cost, which isn't too surprising, and we're actually getting more functionality. So Linus would be happy, right? So get more functionality. And the bottom one there, which was a new metric. So this we weren't able to really go back in time with this, but we did benchmark it fairly early. And we were trying to work out how much of the time we were spending within a project was useful time and how much of the time within a project was valuable time. So that had gone up from 10.3% useful time to 54.5%. So still almost half of our time is wasted, right? But it's a lot better than 90% of our time being wasted, which is a good thing. So this is comparing against ourselves. Yes? what time was wasted. So this was this was a bit of value stream mapping that we did basically, which was following projects and saying, right, for each stage of the project, how much time was spent actually achieving something, how much of it was waiting for something, or how much of it was unnecessary rework, that kind of thing. So you're right, your suspicions are correct. It's a difficult thing to measure. The key there is getting consistency. So it was trying to measure how much of our time was, the old value. You familiar with value stream mapping? Look it up. It's quite an interesting technique. Following the stage of start to the end, following all the way through your process, and mapping how much of that time is elapsed in each step, and how much of that time was spent usefully, value adding, and how much of that time was actually wasted, based on those kinds of things, such as waiting for something to happen, waiting for documents to be signed off, or having to go back and redo something because we got it wrong. So, brilliant. Good question. Thank you. So that was BT. 2008, I went to, I forget where it was now, somewhere in America. Went to a conference and listened to a presentation from the guys at Salesforce.com who'd been doing Scrum for a while. And the one thing that I really took from that talk, from that case study, from that presentation, was how their definition of success was predominantly around predictability. So their organisation was really struggling with the fact that they couldn't really be confident when they were going to get something. Dates were always slipping, deadlines were missed, and so they put everything they could into making sure that, first of all, they got predictability, and from March 2007, they never missed the deployment. They're always on time, every month, every couple of weeks. And that was important to them. That was their number one metric. It wasn't their only metric, but it was their number one metric, from what I could gather from this talk. And that's good. Okay, that's something that BT didn't measure, but that doesn't mean that one organisation is more agile than the other. This is about improvement, and as we talked about, using Agile to improve what we're doing. Now, I talked briefly about using the Agile Manifesto, the Agile Manifesto values, or the principles, or perhaps the Scrum But, the Nokia Test. All of those are useful, but not necessarily, well, they're certainly not tailored for you and your organisation. And recently, while I was in Boston, I went to the Agile Games conference. Great fun. Playing games for a few days, talking about Agile. That's how I entertain myself. I had a few beers with a guy called Xavier Quesada Alou, an Argentinian living in Belgium. Great guy, Scrum coach. And we were talking about this idea of Agile organizational agility. And he was talking me through a kind of beta process that he's got in place with some of his clients, which sounded really interesting. And what he does is asks them 100 questions, and they're yes/no questions. So he's built this survey, if you like, of agility, and they're either yes or no. There is no in between. There is no almost. There is no maybe. It reminded me a lot of Scrum's definition of done. Yeah, it's either done or it's not done. It's either yes or a no. And for every question that the company gets a yes for, they get a percent. And obviously with 100, you get a percentage. And this was something that I thought was quite an interesting experiment, an interesting idea. And we started talking about how he's engaged teams and how he's asked the teams, well, what do you think would be a really good definition of Agile? How would you feel you were more Agile? What questions would you come up with effectively? And he asked the team to come up with some questions. And obviously, because the teams aren't usually aware of the latter stages of a transformation, Xavier, being an experienced Agile coach, can throw in some more of the stretching questions. So there's a kind of ratio there between how many that the team get to choose and how many he gets to choose, which I think is a really good idea as well. And we started talking about some of these questions and what kind of questions come up. And what ones would be useful. And what do you think about this one? Does the team have a product owner? Do you think that's a good question or a bad question? It's a good question. Okay. Why did you say that? We need somebody to give the team some direction. We need someone to say whether something is done or not. That's a really useful thing for a team. And Xavier, yes? Right, not everybody's doing Scrum, right? So yeah, and so we might not have a product owner. So just because Scrum says product owner doesn't mean that we're not agile if we don't have a product owner. So what Xavier was saying, this is quite a common question for teams to come up with, and it's got really good intentions. There's good intentions behind it. And we were talking about this, and we'd had a few beers by then, but it was still sensible conversation. And we said, well, maybe we should be focusing on continuously collaborating with our customers. We might have gone down the done route because that might have been really important. But the idea being that we're trying to get to the spirit behind the question, spirit behind the practice, rather than the practice itself. So in a similar kind of vein, we said, well, this is often something that comes up because we look at the framework, we look at the burn downs, and we say, well, are we updating the burn down daily? Is that a sign of a healthy team, perhaps as an organisation? And we thought, well, maybe it's to do the spirit behind that is, are the team using the appropriate artefacts to manage their commitments during the sprint? That might be a better way of asking that question. And so there's a little bit of work that goes into this survey creation. Similarly, does the team have a retrospective every sprint? Do organizations have their macro versions of retrospectives? What did we call them yesterday? We called them operations reviews. We might change that to, is the team regularly taking action to improve their process? Whether it's a retrospective or not, do they just take action regularly to improve themselves? Might be a better question. And again, these are things that you can track over time. So another thing that Xavier did was he had questions in categories. So we would have areas of, and these aren't Xavier's questions, by the way. This is just examples of categories that you might have. You might choose the Scrum values. You might have a category around the customer. You might have another one around learning. You might have another one around engineering practices, and tracking your progress over time. And what this is showing here is that generally we're improving. Courage, we're no more courageous in quarter 2 than we were in quarter 1, and actually, from our failure demand point of view, we're worse in quarter 2. So we're getting more support calls, more issues, more bugs come through in quarter 2 than we were in quarter 1, which doesn't generally say good things. So this is still tracking against ourselves, comparing against ourselves. Another way of looking at it, which I've seen with, and I've been very interested in, is whether we have more of the kind of skill sets, the behaviours, the mindset that will enable us to become a more agile and therefore a better company. And so you see metrics around, do we have more collaborators than cooperators? So cooperation is a good thing, but collaboration is better. So do we look at this? Managing is a good thing, but in some cases leading is better. So we start looking at these things and say, well, yeah, we're green on these, we're doing well on these, we're not so doing well on these. And this is another way of perhaps an organisation looking at the type of skills that they have that will enable them to be more productive, to have higher quality, to have more satisfied customers, perhaps. This is still comparing against ourselves, all right, which can be a really good thing. Some organisations, however, might want to compare themselves against others, their competitors, right, for a feeling of, am I outdoing my competitors? And I know Mike Cohn talks about the fact that you can compare against yourself, might be useful. But if you're improving and you're still nowhere near your competitors, is that of any use whatsoever? Probably not. You're probably still going to die as an organisation. Equally, as long as you're better than your competitors, do you actually really need to improve? Maybe not. As long as you're better than them, that's all you need to be. So you might want to have one eye or two eyes on your competitors. Lots of ways you can do this. So this is an online version of the Nokia Test, the Scrum Butt Test, and this is the results at the moment of question 1. So if you were looking at how am I doing against everybody else with regards to iterations, you can see that the vast majority of people have a fixed iteration of 4 weeks or less. There are quite a few people in there that have fixed iterations of 6 weeks, and so on. Might be useful information to you. Probably not. Probably not, because this is probably one proxy metric too far. But, and I'd probably do something about the colours, but hey. If we're also talking about testing, so this is an interesting one. This is a very well spread answer. So what we're saying here is quite, where are we now? 18% of teams have no dedicated testers on their team. Right, so if you've got a dedicated tester on your team, you're better than 18% of the other people that have done this test. Might be useful. If you want to be better than 47%, then make sure your work is unit tested within the iteration. You're almost in the top half if you're doing unit testing, according to the Nokia Test. Feature tested as soon as completed, software passes acceptance testing, software is deployed. You're getting better and better, and you're getting into the higher echelons of comparative agility, to use a phrase I'm going to use again in a minute. The other one that I picked up here was another interesting spread. Again, not the best choices of colours for these graphs, I would suggest. But agile specification. Now this is saying that 22% of teams have no requirements. 22% of them have big requirements documents. 18% have poor user stories. Now, this is one of the parts of the Nokia test that I'm anxious about. Let's use the word anxious, because what that's saying is good user stories are better than good requirements. Now, that may or may not be the case. Equally, good user stories tied to specifications. Well, what does that mean? Is that better than good requirements tied to specifications? There's some ambiguity here which might not be useful. And the Nokia test is a little bit out of date. A more recent version of comparing agility amongst organizations is something that Mike Conan and Kenny Rubin have put together about, I think, 3 years ago, called Comparative Agility. And what this does is asks questions about 7 different categories, so not too dissimilar to Xavier's idea. So we're talking teamwork is a category, requirements is a category, planning, technical practices, quality, culture, knowledge creating, and outcomes. Again, none of those are really talking about the Agile Manifesto values or principles, but the questions within those categories are probably more specific, as you can see some here. So this is the requirements one. So teams are able to start projects with incomplete requirements. Okay, if you mark that as true, then you get some points. Don't need complete requirements documents before we get started. Now the difference, one of the many differences between comparative agility and the 100 questions Xavier's approach is this has got not just yes or no. So it's got true, it's got more true than false, it's got neither true nor false, more false than true, and false and non-applicable. So there are different levels of scoring with each of these questions, which gives you more of a range, it gives you more accuracy. It's a little bit harder to judge because we're getting subjective here, especially if you're talking across an organization. You might have some teams that are completely true, some teams that are more true than false. It gets a little bit harder, but you get a result something like this. Okay, so this is for an organization that shall remain nameless. And what this is saying here is that compared to other organizations within their industry and of a similar size, they're doing less well than average on teamwork. But they're doing pretty well at planning, not very well at technical practices, pretty good at knowledge creating, and they're delivering stuff, so their outcomes are pretty good compared to everybody else. So this might be really useful. And this will become more relevant over time. Now, with regards to comparative agility, there's obviously some potential issues with this, as there is with everything. At the moment, what I've heard from people is that this is very project level focused. So you can get a version of this tool for your own organization and do this on a project level basis, and then take your aggregated scores. And do you need all of your projects to do this, to get a true view? Well, you certainly need a good sample. Now, BT sample size was 5%, which seemed quite low until you bear in mind how many projects there were in BT and how long it takes to measure them. Do we need all of them? Maybe. It could be quite time consuming to do all that. There's quite a few questions there, and they're quite subjective, which requires you to be detached. It requires you to be honest and take a kind of step back view and honestly assess where we are with this. And how do we assess these grey areas? That can be quite difficult for organisations. Most, we talked about yesterday, well, not me, some of the people on the stage yesterday talked about how the average driver thinks they're above average. In fact, 70% of drivers think they're above average. We generally have this optimistic view, and that's going to inflate our scores. If we inflate our scores, then that will almost inevitably lead to some complacency within our organisation, plus it makes the data that other organisations are using incorrect. So not only are we requiring ourselves to be accurate in our assessment, we're also requiring our organisation's competitors to be accurate in the information that they're giving. Because there's no independent person going around and checking this. We're relying on everybody to input their own information. And despite this being around for a few years, the amount of meaningful data is still relatively low. So are you getting a realistic view of the industry? It's a really good tool. Could become more useful over time. For those of you that were here for my talk earlier on, I talked about at a team level using 8 metrics for working out how good we're doing as a team, how agile we are as a team. I think these things could be applied to the organisation as well in 2 different ways. Either we could compare teams, so we might have one team mapped on top of another, or perhaps departments mapped on top of each other just to see how we're doing, identify any common patterns with these things. That might be quite useful. Equally, we could flip it and say, well, let's just focus on the maximums, the minimums, the other way around, obviously the red's the minimums, the blue is the maximums, and then taking averages across our organisation and seeing where we are as an organisation. We could even change the scalings. So I gave some examples of what different marks might be for these different metrics at a team level. We could either use those and aggregate them across the teams and departments, or use different metrics for the organisation. So what would self-management be for an organisation? The product owners are actively engaged in the strategic direction of our organisation, perhaps. That we have attention to results at the team level, then aggregating that up to the organisation, or changing the way that we measure it. Whatever you do, however you decide to measure this thing, because what I've done so far is say basically you can't copy anybody else, is don't keep it secret. Don't have one view of the world for inside your organisation and another view of the world for outside your organisation. The bigger you are, the more likely you are to be dependent upon other organisations, other suppliers, other vendors, partners. And your agility can't be measured in isolation of theirs. So we can't hide this information. I've seen this information hushed up. We can't let this out to the wider world, to the stock market, because if we're shown to be this, that, and the other, then we'll get hammered. It'll be bad for us. We need to be able to create this environment where what we might previously have considered to be bad information is now good information. This idea that we can use this as an organisation. Here's a nice picture for you. Who here has ever been on a diet? Quite a few. In the UK, apparently, according to the BBC, in the UK, a quarter of the population of Great Britain is on a diet most of the time. Not has ever been on a diet, is on a diet most of the time. Surely a diet is for a reason. It's not a way of life. Is it? I don't know. Seems like a high number for a long period of time. One of the organisations in the UK that specialises in providing dietary support and products, their latest tagline at the moment is "lose weight for the last time," implying that it's not just once in our lifetime we will do this. So part of me really wants to ask those of you that were brave enough to put your hands up to this a question, but I don't think it's really fair. So I've been on a diet, all right, and it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult to change your habits. It's quite difficult to change doing some of the things that you've become accustomed to and like, and reverting back to a more healthy and more disciplined way of life. That's quite difficult. And there are some common traps that people fall into. There are some common things that will help us. One of the most common things that help us when we're on a diet and when we're trying to change is getting some real-time and objective data. So getting on the scales every day, seeing the numbers. Also plotting that on a graph, because if I don't eat anything for one day, that doesn't necessarily mean I lose weight by the next time I weigh myself. some of these things take time to kick in and give you the benefit. So we need to plot our progress over time. So seeing this steady overall improvement, despite there being little blips along the way, is a useful motivator, it's a useful incentive. But this is a proxy metric. Okay? Weight is a proxy metric, just like agility is a proxy metric for performance. What the real metric here is, am I able to do the things that I want to do? So I want to carry on playing football at the weekend. And I can't do that unless I lose some weight and get fit. That's my goal. I want to be able to play football. I don't just want to lose weight. I want to lose weight for a reason. It might be I want to lose weight because I want to be healthier. It might be I want to lose weight because I want to fit into the nice dress that I've bought. Well, maybe not. But the point here is that if we lose weight for losing weight's sake, we're less likely for it to be a success, and it's less likely to take hold for the long term. If we focus on what we're losing weight for, A, we're more likely to be successful, and B, we're more likely to keep it off because we're going to want to do these things. And the same is true for an organization who wants to become agile. We don't want to become agile for agile's sake. So we focus on what we're doing this for, and we try and track that progress. Now, tracking progress can be very difficult. Coming up with appropriate metrics can be very difficult. All right? And there will be some very tempting, short-term, easy to see metrics and incentives to change things that might not be encouraging the right types of behavior. David Anderson said yesterday, bugs per feature might be a good thing to track. I think it might be, if it's being tracked by the team. If it's being tracked by management on the team, then it will have a very different effect than if it's being tracked by the team for the team. So it's not just what you measure, it's who's measuring it and what that metric is being done for. What we don't want is for our metrics to target dysfunctional behavior or encourage dysfunctional behavior. We don't want teams to be covering up their mistakes. We want to see our mistakes. Mistakes are a good thing. And whatever you do measure, you really need to be careful what you're picking, because it might just improve. Who's heard of Sergey Bubka? Quite a lot of you. Okay, tell me why Sergey Bubka's in my presentation. Constant improvement? Yeah. Sergey Bubka was rewarded with a bonus every time he broke the world record. All right. Every time he broke the world record, he got a bonus. I'm not quite sure how much it was. So he broke the world record a lot, but only by a little bit. So every time he went to a meet, he would break the world record by a little bit, and then he'd fail. The next meet, he'd break it again, just by a little bit, and then he'd fail. Now, when he retired, we don't actually really know if we ever saw the best of him. Certainly the people that had paid their money to see him that day didn't see the best of him that day. Did he ever achieve his potential? Possibly not. Because the incentives, while they seemed a good thing in the first place, because we want to see world records broken, weren't encouraging the right behavior. And that kind of thing can very easily creep into our organization. So when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to become a useful measure. Or a good measure. So, where am I now? Kind of okay on time. What I've got here now are a few signs, a few signals, that if you see them within your organization, they're indicators that we're going in the right path, we're going in the right direction, we're doing the right things, we're becoming healthier, we're becoming more agile for a good reason. Some of them you may not even know what the hell they mean, because I'm from England. I don't know whether you get He-Man over here. Do you get He-Man? Did you get He-Man? That was one of my favourite programs when I was growing up. So He-Man. So this is talking about, well, I don't know, Scrum Masters of the universe. The idea behind this, okay, is that we will, if we get Scrum Masters, if we get product owners anchored as real jobs within our organisations, real jobs, not just roles that people play now and again, part-time, or rebadging our project managers, agile project managers. If we really anchor these types of servant leaders and product owners into our organisation, then we're more likely to be able to deliver better products quicker at higher quality. That's an indicator to me. So do we see organisations valuing these roles? That's one of them. Okay, very much doubt you'll know what this means. Anybody know what the hell this is? No. No, this is a very British TV program. Jim will fix it. So Jimmy Savile, very eccentric person, he encouraged, this was probably about 20, 30 years ago, he encouraged people to write into him with things that they would really, really like to be able to do. I'd like to train with the Harlem Globetrotters, or I would like to meet the Prime Minister. Kids to write in and do these kinds of things. And he would take great pride in saying, I've fixed that for you, I'll arrange that for you, I'll make this happen for you. So the more fixes you see is a good thing. Well, I would say it's the other way around in an organisation. The more fixes we see in an organisation, that's not a good thing. Failure demand should be going down. We should be able to deliver more functionality rather than more support calls. So failure demand going down is an indicator that we are becoming more agile, we are being able to deliver more quality, but that's not something we generally measure, and when we do, it usually leads to dysfunctional behaviour. Kaizen, continuous improvement, both at the team level and the organisational level. So we should be looking for ways, and we should be looking to see if this is becoming part of our culture, if we have a continuous improvement culture. That's another sign. Magic Johnson. So for those of you that were with me earlier on, I talked a lot about sport. Magic Johnson holds the record for the highest number of assists in an NBA season. He, very good basketball player, but he made his record for helping others to score. And when I was asked a question at the end of my last session around performance reviews and why do individuals keep signing up for their own tasks rather than helping the team deliver? And arguably, my argument was that organisations reward that type of behaviour. So I think as an organisation, if we start rewarding people helping others to become successful, or people focusing on the team, the product, the organisation rather than themselves, that's the sign of a really healthy, agile organisation. And we might want to institutionalise that in our reward structures and our reward frameworks, but we can do that without it anyway, to a degree. Are our people becoming more cross-functional? Are they becoming more multi-skilled to a generalising specialist degree? Not that everybody can do the same things, not that everybody is exactly the same, but that this isn't the only thing that I do, and I'm not the only person that does it. We want more people with some kind of overlap, so that our teams are more cross-functional, able to deliver what we need to do, rather than the projects we choose are chosen because of the skill set we have. Much better position to be in as an organisation. Do we have confidence in our systems? Are we able to make changes? It's related to our second point about, can we change direction as an organisation quite quickly? Can we change direction in our projects and our products quite quickly? Do we have confidence in the stability of our systems? That's another indicator of an agile organisation, confidence in the stability of our systems. Another one, are things done? Now, I see a lot of organisations that have this concept of done. Anybody heard of done? Yeah, done's not healthy. All right, done is when we get to the end of the iteration and the team say to the product owner or whoever it is, "Here, look what we've done this sprint." And they say, "Wow, it's brilliant. I can use that. Let's deploy it." They say, "Oh, whoa! It's not done. You can't deploy it yet. Yeah, we haven't really tested it yet. We haven't integrated it with this system over here. But it kind of works on this environment. It's done, but it's not done. So organisations that are done, getting things done, rather than having this concept of done, that's a sign of a healthy organisation, a more agile organisation. Cycle time. That might be tied in with automation. We might want to tie those two together, because very rarely does an organisation get to the point where it can reduce its cycle time to the level it needs and wants without an investment and an improvement in automation. But the point is not automation itself. The automation is there for a reason. The automation is there to, first of all, reduce cycle time, but also improve our quality. So cycle time, can we measure the amount of time it takes us to get an idea to our users? Done. If that's improving, that's a good sign. Can I play football at the weekends? Can we as an organisation do what we need to do? All right. Rather than be limited by the skill set that we have or the legacy situation that we find ourselves in. As an organisation, can we do what we need to do? and we change direction. And this was an interesting one, something that I've thrown in at the last minute. I wasn't quite sure whether to put in because it's a little bit controversial maybe. But in all the organisations I've been in, there's been this common theme that. So this here is a representation of crossing the chasm. So in your organisations you'll have some really some visionaries, some early adopters, some people that you don't need to convince to do this agile thing. You'll have a lot of pragmatists, which are, well, if you can prove to me that it works, I'll give it a go. And then you get some conservatives that once you've convinced all the pragmatists, you might have a chance of convincing. And then you'll have some skeptics that you're just never going to convince, so just don't even waste your time. What this is saying here is there's a chasm. And in order for you to get to a tipping point, you need to convince enough of your pragmatists. But you can't convince pragmatists without some evidence that other pragmatists have been convinced. So we've got, in every organisation that I've been in, there's always been a very highly vocal, sceptical, emotionally resistant person or people to Agile. And often they've come from the design community, but not always. And we've known that once they're on board, we're on our way. Once we've convinced Dave, once Dave is telling his colleagues that this is a good thing, we've broken the back of this thing. And so you might have people as metrics. If we've got so-and-so on board, we're a more agile organisation, we're well on our way to being an agile organisation. So there's a few patterns. I don't really buy into this view that put forward yesterday that Agile is over. So Scott Bell suggested that perhaps Agile is over. I disagree with that. He also said that if you're an organisation thinking of doing Agile now, it's too late. The point has passed you by. Again, I disagree with that for one big reason, which is that while there are a lot of organisations already out there doing some form of Agile, very few of them are doing it great. And to me there are two ways of succeeding with this Agile thing. The first is to catch up. Just by doing Agile, even if you're not going to do it perfectly, is almost always better than the way we've been doing it before, in my experiences. So that's the first way. And then the second way you can succeed is be one of the few that's doing it great. Because you haven't got that far to catch up. People are always overinflating how good they are. So I don't think the end is nigh. I think in any organisation, when you're taking this decision, we need to ask why. First, most important question, draw that picture of the future of your Agile organisation. What does it look like? Look for some continuous improvement. My opinion, inside first. Look internally. Are we improving ourselves? And you can capture data on that. It's not easy, but it's definitely doable. But more importantly, are we making regular progress? Go and see. So I'm not brilliant with my Japanese symbols. I'm also assuming that you aren't either. This here is translated to Genshu Genbutsu, which basically means go and have a look. Don't rely on reports. Don't rely on data. Go and see. Because if you go and see your team collaborating, if you go and see the team working with the product owner, if you go and see the sprint review, you'll know whether this team is doing better than they were before. Data's useful, but don't underestimate the power of actually going and having a look. Don't think that it's pointless. All right, it might be difficult. There might be people out there that are saying, if you haven't done it already, it's too late. My advice would be, just go for it. Take the jump. Be courageous. Start working in the right way. Pick some metrics. Work with them. Be open to the fact that they might lead to dysfunctional behaviour, but just take the courage to have a go. Work in small steps. So don't expect to get 7 out of 10 straight away. Be happy with 1, 2, 3 in certain areas and get movement. And then celebrate success in all the various parts that you'll find it. Small successes here, there and everywhere. Build on those. Build those into your metrics. Change your metrics based on those successes and what you're learning. Get some momentum going. Once you've got the momentum going, then it becomes the thing to do. Then it becomes the thing that we should be doing, the thing that we know we should be doing, the thing that we're doing for the right reasons. Let's get on this. The best way to do that, to build that momentum, to celebrate those successes, is make things visible. Don't shove things under the carpet, as we say in England. Even the failures, don't shove those under the carpet. Show that we can fail. Show that if we don't hit this metric, it's not the end of the world. We've still got time. When I was talking about becoming an agile team, and I had my metrics suggestions for the agile team, I never got to 10 out of 10. I always left a gap, because good teams know that you can never really get 10 out of 10. There's no point taking 10 off the scale, because we need something to aim for. But when you get to 8 or 9, teams will find new ways to improve. They will find ways to stretch themselves even further. Organizations will as well. By the time you've changed, there will be new challenges that will require you to change again. Change is the constant in the business world now. So an organization that thinks they're done really is done. They're finished. We've got to keep reacting. Do you do motor racing over here? I'm going through all of the sports. I'm hopefully going to hit on one soon. Do you guys motor racing? If you're keen on motor racing? Formula One? Couple. Well, this is a picture of Nigel Mansell. It's a bit old. One of ours, England's most famous racing drivers in Formula One. This is a picture of him after the 1991 Canadian Grand Prix, which probably doesn't really mean anything to you at the moment. But what happened in the 1991 Canadian Grand Prix, Nigel Mansell was so far ahead of everybody else that on the final lap he slowed down to wave to the crowd. Bit of a victory lap, a parade. He slowed down so much that his car stalled, and he couldn't get it started again. And he ended up finishing 6th, which cost his chances of the title. The reason I bring this in here is because organizations that set themselves targets for transformation will meet them. All right. Now, at one organization that I worked that will remain nameless, they declared to the stock market that by September 2000X, we will be, as an organization, 100% agile. Bold claim to make. Made it very publicly. And do you know what? They made it. Even though large parts of the organization didn't even know what agile was, they made it. Somehow. The figures proved it. Declaring victory too early is a massive, massive mistake to make. It's very tempting, and as soon as you've made that promise, it's very hard to make. So you need to be patient. All right, these things are going to take time. Don't try and achieve your metrics too soon. As soon as you put metrics out there, the challenge will be on to meet them. All right, but the best things take time. And seeing as it went so well in my first talk, I say that because I got a round of applause. I'm going to take that as it went well. I'm going to finish this one with a little bit of a poem. Now, as I said before, I'm not up on poetry. I only made this decision a couple of days ago, and I'm a traditionalist really in that I think poems should rhyme. I don't know about you, but this poem doesn't. But I'm still going to read it because after I read it a couple of times, I thought, do you know what? That actually reminds me a lot of the agile organizational transformation journeys that I've seen. So what I'm going to leave you with this, and I'm going to see maybe at the end of it you think, might be something in that. So this one's called No Rest for Success by Felix Lugo. And he says, success is a journey, not a destination. Every beginner is a winner. Success is not escaping problems, but facing them creatively. There is no success without sacrifice. Great success always calls for great sacrifice. Even failure can become an important ingredient to success. Failure just means that you have not yet succeeded. I'd rather change my mind and succeed than have my own way and fail. Success without conflict is unrealistic. Any person can be successful on smooth seas, but it is the victory over the storm that gains true honor. Success doesn't come through the way you think it comes through the way you think. Never settle for less than success. You thought it was finished. Success is doing something good when you can, where you can, while you can. It's better to attempt to do something great and fail than attempt to do nothing and succeed. Success is not necessarily reaching your goal, but reaching the maximum possibilities in light of the opportunities that come your way. To keep your values on target, remember to live so that when you arrive, you'll have pride behind you and hope ahead of you. The success is truly the path to heaven. Success is never ending because success is like the process of seed planting. Every creative contribution, like a seed planted, may bear fruit. Finally, success is not what you have, it is not what you do, it is who you are and what you want to become of yourself. There you go. So I'll claim that as success. Well, it's dead on 4 o'clock. I apologise. There's no time for questions here, but what I will do is I'll go to the programme at Vickling's stand and I'll be there if you want to ask any questions of me. I've been advised to remind you to vote green on your way out. All right, it's ecologically conscientious thing to do. Vote green, save the planet. All right, thanks very much for your time.